morning. We're going to go ahead and start because we have a packed auditorium and we have a packed morning this morning. My name is Tim Johnson, and I am chair of the Department of OBGYN here at the University of Michigan. And it's my great privilege to welcome you on behalf of the regents of the university, the dean, and the faculty of the medical school to what is a signal event in the life of this university and any university. It's my privilege this morning to preside over the installation of a new professorship. And we need to all recognize that this is a very historical event. In Western civilization, with the foundation of the universities in the Middle Ages, the recognition of professors have been a signal event at academic universities. And so it's appropriate that so many people this morning convene to recognize this process. I said last night that for a few short moments, we will have the oldest and the newest endowed professorships at the University of Michigan in this room. Some of you know that the Department of OBGYN holds the oldest endowed professorship at the university, endowed in 1898 by Elizabeth Bates. And today we're happy to recognize the F. Wallace and Janet Jeffries professorship, the university's newest endowed professorship. Let me talk just a moment about this professorship. This really has a lot to do with collaboration between the University of Michigan and Planned Parenthood. And Robin Menon, who was the president of Planned Parenthood almost 12 years ago, suggested that we needed to memorialize the strong relationship between Planned Parenthood and the University of Michigan and make sure that this relationship survived in perpetuity. And the best way at a university to get things to survive in perpetuity is to endow a professorship. At Planned Parenthood, the best way to survive in perpetuity is to build a new building. And they had a very successful short campaign to raise funds for Planned Parenthood. And we had a slightly longer but equally successful campaign to raise an endowment for this, the first professorship in reproductive health in the United States. I have to recognize Wally and Janet Jeffries, who were the impetus for much of this work, and for whom this chair is named. Wally Jeffries grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and came to the University of Michigan as a varsity swimmer. Did his undergraduate work at the University of Michigan, went to the University of Michigan Medical School, did his residency at the University of Michigan, and I think stayed on the faculty for a year or two before he went to St. Joseph Mercy Hospital to start a large private practice, Jeffries, Postmus, and Budman, as I remember from when I was a resident. And Wally went on to become chair of the Department of OBGYN at St. Joe's and was the residency program director and really led a distinguished department at our sister hospital. Wally, after he retired, went on to become the member of the board of Planned Parenthood. And so we have an interesting relationship between an OBGYN who was chair of a hospital called St. Joseph Mercy Hospital, and then was actively involved in Planned Parenthood. But his partner in all of this disruptive behavior was Janet Jeffries. Janet received her first degree from a school in Ohio, and then came to the University of Michigan, where she got a Master's of Science in Nursing, with a real focus on preventive nursing, public health nursing, and reproductive health. And her entire career was committed to that. Some of her career was as a nurse, but much of her career was a wife and a mother. And Wally always had a feminist side and always had a profound conscience, but Janet added a lot to Wally's feminism, and she added a lot to his moral consciousness. And I know that on a regular basis when he would go home after difficult days, and as a chair, we know about difficult days, she was a great support, and she would always kind of, if he was kind of not sure where to go, she was, I'm sure, happy to push him in the right direction. So when we decided to think about having what this professorship, it was pretty clear that given the contributions that Wally and Janet Jeffries had made to OBGYN in this community, to reproductive health in this community, their recognition across the state as advocates for reproductive health and reproductive justice and women's rights and feminism and all the things that we in this room hold very, very dear, it was a no-brainer that we would ask Wally and Janet to let us name this professorship after them. And we were very pleased that they were happy to do that. So let me just say that we're going to hear from two speakers later today. One is Lisa Harris, who will shortly become, well, actually, she actually became the first F. Wallace and Janet Jeffries Professor when she was approved by the Regents effective the 1st of September. But we're going to recognize it today. In this department, it's our tradition to recognize chairs with chairs. And we have two chairs here. One is for Wally and Janet. I know they don't need any more chairs in their house, but they do get one more. And one is for Lisa. And I'd like to ask them to come up and maybe if Wally and Janet, you'd sit in the chairs, Lisa, and I'll stand behind you, and we'll make this official, okay? So one of the things we said last night when we had a small group for dinner was we were wondering what the F. Wallace and Janet Jeffries Professor was going to be working on and thinking about in a scholarly fashion 110 years from now. This chair is endowed, it'll be at the University of Michigan in perpetuity, and we suspect that the issues will be significant 110 years from now in reproductive health, because I suspect that issues of gender and sexual rights and reproductive rights will be intractable. So we couldn't be more pleased that this will be going on for a very, very long time. So congratulations to everybody. So let me just say a word about our two speakers, because we really want to hear from them today. Lisa Harris, as most of us in this room know, is a professor here at the University of Michigan. She's now the F. Wallace and Janet Jeffries Professor. She grew up in Canada, but came to the United States to attend Harvard, where she graduated with a degree in English and then went to Harvard Medical School and did a residency at UC San Francisco, where she became very interested in maternal-fetal conflict and decided that she wanted to do further training in that area around maternal-fetal conflict. And she had some very interesting ideas that were proved to be transformational around the ethics of maternal-fetal conflict. And so she applied to the Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholars Program here at Michigan, and we were thrilled when she was able to come. And Joel Howell, who's sitting here, was the co-director of that program and is one of the people who convinced her to come here. And she did brilliantly well, not surprisingly. In her cohort was another Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar, Maureen Phipps, who's now professor and chair of the department at Brown. So it was a pretty successful cohort. One of the things that we recognized early on is that Lisa had a huge a desire for more information, and I suggested early on that maybe she get a PhD, and she thought I was crazy. But in fact, she did go on and obtain a PhD in American culture with her work on the history of in vitro fertilization in the United States, and Regina Moran Sanchez was her dissertation chair and is a distinguished historian of American feminist medicine, and wrote a great book called Sympathy in Science. If you haven't read Sympathy in Science, you should need to go on Google today and Amazon.com and get a copy of Sympathy in Science. Unfortunately, they can get it for 1 cent, but it's a great book that talks about the history of women in medicine in the United States, and actually highlights Elizabeth Mosier, after whom Mosier Hall was named, who was a physician trained at the University of Michigan, but who couldn't get a faculty appointment, and so she became Dean of Women and played a role working on hygiene for women at the University of Michigan in the mid-1800s. So there's a distinguished history here going back. Anyway, Lisa got her PhD. She was very involved with Planned Parenthood from early on, and has established what is now one of the premier partnerships in conjunction with Annessa Dalton and her colleagues in our family planning division from the early days. Let me just say a word about our second speaker. All of you are here because you know who Willie Parker is. Willie Parker went to Berea College. He went to medical school, did a residency in OBGYN. He did a preventive medicine fellowship. He got an MPH. He was an EIS fellow at the CDC. He then went on to work in a variety of jobs. And in the mid-1990s, he was, actually mid-2000s, he was in Hawaii. And he hadn't decided what he wanted to do yet when he grew up. And he discovered that he had a passion for women's health and a passion for reproductive rights, and applied for the newly developing Family Planning Fellowship that was funded through the Bixby Center. And we were thrilled when Willie came to Michigan as our first fellow. and he has exceeded all of our expectations in terms of not only his clinical work, but his advocacy, and we're going to be hearing about that today. But let me just start off by introducing Lisa. I'll have her come up here. And Lisa, I have something for you. In addition to your chair, it's traditional in this department for us to give a copy of the plaque. Some of you who know our department and know that there's a poster upstairs. For all of our professorships, we have a line drawing done. This is a drawing of Wally and Janet. It says the F. Wallet and Janet Jeffries Professorship in Reproductive Health. And down here, Lisa Harris, 2014. So I hope you'll enjoy this on your wall. So our agenda for today is Lisa is going to make some remarks about the next 3 years of her career and give some future visioning in terms of what she wants to accomplish here at Michigan as the Jeffries Professorship. And then I'm just going to let you just bring Willie to the podium. We all know who Willie is. And I just want to make sure that both Lisa and Willie have plenty of time to talk. So, Lisa.
Am I using this?
Yeah,
okay.
Please.
Wow. Thank you for being here. You don't all know each other, but I know so many of you, and you are a wonderful group of colleagues and leaders and mentors and family and friends, supporters, students, trainees, advocates. Did I miss anybody? And it's pretty overwhelming to have, this moment is very overwhelming, and I'm so glad that so many of you could share it. And Dr. Parker, Willie, thank you for traveling here. We are all so proud of you and the difference you are making through the care that you provide and through your wonderful and powerful voice. And you're all going to get to hear that voice very shortly. But before Willie speaks, I'm going to take about 15 minutes or so to talk about three things. The theme that has most animated my career, and as you heard, I was an English major, so I like themes. And that theme is reproductive justice. And second, I want to talk about vision and the power of vision, the visions I've been exposed to and been the beneficiary of, and my own vision for reproductive justice here at University of Michigan. And then third, I want to talk about gratitude, because I have so much to be thankful for and so many people to thank. So I was drawn, as some of you know, to OBGYN as a medical student because it was so messy, actually messy, body fluids everywhere. But it was also socially messy and politically messy. And when you look at reproduction and reproductive health care and reproductive health policy, everything is all there. Meaning you can read a culture, you can read a nation through reproduction. You can tell how gender and gender relations work and if there is or is not gender equality. You can tell how race and ethnicity work and whether there is racial equality. You can see how social class and poverty are understood, how immigration is viewed, how political power flows, how laws are made. It's all right there in reproduction. And so that's where I landed, because I like all that stuff, even though it probably makes a lot of people just turn and run in the other direction. And with the immense help of so many of you, I have led a wonderful interdisciplinary professional life here, first as a research fellow, as you heard, as an RWJ fellow, then as a PhD student, and then finally as a faculty member. I know that I am seen as somebody who cares deeply about reproductive rights, and sometimes that makes me a polarizing kind of person. But that's okay. It's absolutely true. I care deeply about abortion rights. But it's actually a really narrow view of what I care about. I care about abortion because I care that women are able to have the reproductive lives that they want. And I care that women have the reproductive lives that they want because I care that women have the lives that they want, including the opportunity to live in health and to fulfill hopes and dreams. What I care about and what many of you care about is bigger than abortion. And it's probably more aptly called reproductive justice, not reproductive rights, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Reproductive rights, as we usually talk about it, means the right to control one's fertility and to not become pregnant or a parent at a particular moment. And for some women, whether or not they are able to get an abortion is indeed their main reproductive rights issue. And in the current legislative climate, that right is most certainly in jeopardy. But for many women, it is not just their claim to abortion that's in jeopardy, but it's their claim to maternity as well. And this is particularly true for women of color, for low-income women, for women who are marginalized in any way at all. Their claim to maternity is in jeopardy because if you look historically, they might have been sterilized against their will. Actually, you don't have to look historically. You can look contemporarily and see that too in California prisons. Or more recently, they might have been coerced into getting a contraceptive implant in order to receive welfare benefits, or they might have had a cesarean section performed that they did not consent to, or they might be arrested in pregnancy because somebody suspected they were addicted to something. Alternatively, they might desperately want to become pregnant and become a parent, but have no way to access costly infertility treatments because they don't have health insurance or because the public health insurance that they have does not cover infertility treatment. These are all examples of what I would call reproductive injustice. And no matter what kind of reproductive injustice you look at, it has been primarily women of color and low-income women, or again, women marginalized in whatever way, who are disproportionately affected. So when we add issues of race and class and ethnicity to reproduction, we see that women are owed reproductive rights far beyond just abortion rights. So it makes sense that in the 1990s, it was women of color advocacy groups like Sister Song, like Asian Communities for Reproductive Justice, that first argued for a much more expansive idea of what constitutes reproductive rights. And they called this idea reproductive justice. A reproductive justice framework demands attention to racial justice and economic justice and environmental justice. Another way to say all this, maybe a little bit more straightforward, is that reproductive justice is a commitment to three core values: the right of every person to have a child if they want, the right of every person to not have a child if they don't want to, and the right of every person to parent in humane and adequate circumstances. In other words, reproductive justice means fulfilling one's reproductive destiny. So that's what I've tried to live and practice. And it feels entirely natural to me that I could care for women at the time of birth and at the time of miscarriage and at the time of abortion. You know, these moments of emotion keep taking me by surprise, and I'm never quite sure when they're going to pop up. It just popped up right now. And it actually reminded me when I saw Cider House Rules the first time, and I saw that he was a caregiver at the time of birth and for abortion, and it was completely consistent. I just burst into tears in the movie theater because no one had quite articulated that before, but I guess that's what I'm feeling right now. So the concept of reproductive justice is roomy enough, it's capacious enough to account for all of those things. So perhaps not surprisingly, when I think about University of Michigan's contributions in the future, I think about their contributions to global reproductive justice. And so now I want to move and talk about vision. I'm going to take a drink of water first. So my vision is that University of Michigan is the leader and the best among academic communities working towards reproductive justice. And that vision will be embodied in a new center for sexual rights and reproductive justice, an interdisciplinary intellectual community, a research hub, a think tank, a do tank, with the mission of working towards reproductive justice. And to date, it's been primarily advocacy groups doing this work, not exclusively, but largely. So we don't actually yet know what it looks like for a big university to do reproductive justice work. For certain, it means working alongside advocacy groups without stepping on them and without co-opting their voices. But it also means deploying the particular strengths of a university community, including teaching and research and clinical care. But before I go on to specifics, I want to talk more generally about vision and its power. Vision is the answer to the question, what will this program, this project, what will this look like when it is successful? Vision is seeing the future, actually seeing it. That's why it's called vision. And the business literature tells us that vision is important because it inspires and motivates and gives purpose, and it shows us where we're headed. And to this, I want to add that I believe that vision has power to actually pull us towards it. It's not magic, but it can feel that way. The best analogy I can think of is buying a new car. So anybody bought a new car or looked at and thought about buying a new car recently? What happens when you make the decision to buy a car? Lila knows. All of a sudden, what do you see when you're driving? All the cars, the makes and models that you're thinking about. You've been driving around in this universe all this time not noticing those cars, but all of a sudden you have a vision that you're going to be in a new car, and the world looks different to you. You make decisions differently, you see things differently, you hear things differently, you feel things differently, you see opportunities and choices differently. Your brain and eyes and heart are attentive in a new way. And that's the power of vision. You put it out there, and then all of a sudden where you are is different, and the world looks different to you, and that's why it's important. So I have learned this here. I have learned this because I've always been surrounded by people who have shared their visions with me and believed in my own vision. I grew up entirely oblivious. My parents are here, my dad and my mom, and Lila's here. I grew up entirely oblivious to the fact that there might be hurdles or barriers towards any of my goals. Didn't know. So I thank my parents for whatever it was that they did to make me always believe that if I could see something, I could get there. And Lila, my main wish for you is that I can do that for you. As an adult, I had the benefit of spending my early career, among people with vision. And I want to note 3 people in particular. There have been many others, and I'm going to have a lot of more thank yous at the end, but I want to mention 3 now. The first is Dr. Joel Howell, who, as you heard, is an internist and historian and ran the RWJ program when I came here as a fellow. And he had a vision of medical research that was deeply interdisciplinary, meaning that it came from the conviction that if we want to improve health and healthcare, we can't do it in narrow disciplinary silos. We need to bring multiple perspectives to it. And that vision was incredibly exciting to me, and it brought me here in 1998. And that led me to Dr. Tim Johnson. And he had a vision for an OBGYN department that embraced and embodied interdisciplinarity and global women's reproductive rights and justice. He saw women's health as something so interconnected that to everything else that it could not just be owned by OBGYNs or by physicians, but it had to be shaped by scholars. It had to be shaped by scholars in women's studies, and he has an appointment there, the first person ever I know who was an OBGYN and a women's studies professor, and gave me that vision for myself. His vision inspired me and gave me a home like I'd never had before. So I signed on for the ride. He also had a shared vision, as you heard about, with Robin Menon, the former CEO of Planned Parenthood here in Ann Arbor. Robin died nearly 10 years ago, but not before she and Dr. Johnson could realize their shared vision of finding and supporting a person who could bridge University of Michigan and Planned Parenthood and ensure that this department would have an enduring commitment to family planning and abortion care. And this chair embodies that relationship, and I'm so honored and humbled to sit in it. So I've been the beneficiary of so many people's visions. My vision of University of Michigan Center for Sexual Rights and Reproductive Justice is one that has benefited from the input and wisdom of many people, some here in this room, Alex Stern, Ed Goldman, the Reproductive Justice Faculty Group, and no doubt will continue to be shaped by many voices. It will be an interdisciplinary intellectual community that will have measurable impact on policy and practice locally and contribute in significant and novel ways to global sexual rights and reproductive justice. And I don't have the luxury of time to share a lot of details, but I want to share a glimpse of 4 of its most important features because they reflect the uniqueness of University of Michigan and of the Midwest. First is interdisciplinarity. As you've no doubt heard and realize already, U of M is uniquely so. And former President Mary Sue Coleman said it perfectly. She said at University of Michigan, and I'm quoting, "We understand that interdisciplinarity emerges naturally from problem solving. Substantive issues are often multifaceted and not constrained to lie within the boundaries of a single discipline." So interdisciplinary work isn't something that we do just because it's fun, although it is fun, but we do it because it's a problem-solving strategy. The most difficult and intractable problems need to be looked at from many angles, Making advances in reproductive health and rights and justice is one of those arenas that absolutely requires interdisciplinary contributions. And therefore, the center will be filled with a range of people, clinical practitioners in a range of disciplines, basic scientists, social scientists, lawyers and legal scholars, journalists, policymakers, artists, and humanities scholars, including historians, scholars of race, ethnicity, gender, communications, discourse, and popular culture, and many more probably. The center will build partnerships with advocacy and community groups in southeastern Michigan and beyond to help ensure that it's the needs of the reproductive justice movement and not just the needs of academics, institutions that are being met. The second component is curricular and educational. The center will help develop new undergraduate and graduate courses, tracks, and theme semesters related to reproductive justice. Curricula development for clinical practitioners will be guided by the question, how does one practice in a reproductive justice framework? We don't actually know the answer to that question yet. And I want to share just one example that helps illuminate that question. So we in family planning love LARC devices, long-acting reversible contraception, IUDs and implants. And because they're so good at preventing unintended pregnancy. And several funders provide free LARC devices to low-income women. That's reproductive rights work. But when a woman with a free LARC device doesn't like it anymore or wants to become pregnant, we don't actually make provisions for how she gets that device out. If we were delivering care in a reproductively just world, meaning we cared about the whole continuum of reproductive life goals and not just her desire to limit her fertility at one moment in her life, then every LARC device that went in would come right with a free voucher, that you could go anywhere, anytime and get your device out, right? But that's not the model we're practicing in. And that's the difference between practicing in a reproductive rights framework and a reproductive justice framework. The third feature of the center is that it will aim to intervene in the extreme social and political polarization around abortion in the United States. And it will do so in a range of ways, including engaging in what my research team has come to call danger talk. And I just want to recognize, I don't see everybody in the crowd right now, but I just want to recognize Jane Hassinger and Lisa Martin and Michelle Debbing, who have been the most wonderful collaborators since 2007, and Megan Seawald, who is a more recent addition to our team. There's students in the room, I don't know if Emma is here, but students in the room who have come in and out of our team as well, and I'm so grateful for all of your contributions. Danger talk is speech that we usually self-censor because it feels too dangerous to utter, dangerous to the movements and causes that we love. For example, pro-choice rhetoric relies on the idea that the fetus is unimportant, of little moral significance, nothing. But if you do abortion work, and there are a bunch of us in the room who do, the fetus is not nothing, it's something. But it feels dangerous to say that. And it feels dangerous when I see those big anti-abortion signs on my way to Planned Parenthood, and I think to myself, yeah, that looks like what I'm going to do today at work. Can't say that, a little dangerous. So the center will be a place where danger talk is encouraged. It will be a place to be off message, to look for nuance and complexity and grayness, and not pretend that everything is black or white. Furthermore, people who disagree about abortion may otherwise share a vision of what a reproductively just world looks like, one in which all people are free from sexual violence and coercion, have safe, fulfilling relationships, and the resources that they need to raise children in humane and healthy environments. Reproductive justice is potentially an area where there can be collaboration, even as there are deep differences. And there are few spaces for this kind of engagement, and I would like the center to be such a place. I don't know how we're going to get out of this extreme political polarization until we can have the courage to reflect and engage in new ways. And finally, fourth, the way we do the center's work will mirror the values of the work itself, meaning the center's core values will be the values of reproductive justice movements: diversity, inclusion, flattened hierarchies, recognition that broad structures of inequality impact reproductive health and impact family life. Accordingly, the center will be a place to experiment with new ways to create and support a diverse workforce, to manage professional life and home entanglements. Maybe that means flexible schedules or more use of technology, or maybe less use of technology. Maybe it means food trucks outside so you can pick up your dinner at the end of the day, or maybe it means you can bring your laundry to work and get it done while you're in meetings. I don't know what it means, but the point is, you like that idea? The point is that how we do the work matters, and the conditions in which we do it matter. And those conditions will be a subject of inquiry, just as reproductive justice itself will be. Now I'm going to just wrap up by talking about gratitude. I would not be able to be here at this moment without the help and love and kindness of so many people. You heard about my family a bit already, but you didn't hear that my mom takes care of Lila so that I can go hither and yon to speak and give papers. And you didn't hear that I usually send a draft of a paper of any new idea to my dad first, because that's a really safe way to figure out if I'm crazy or if this is an idea that might matter. And you didn't hear how Lila inspires me every day to be a little more courageous and try new things. And I'm deeply indebted to countless people who babysit, cat sit, clean my house, keep my yard from getting overgrown, shovel my driveway, keep life going. And their labor tends to be invisible. And I just want to say on the record that none of my visible achievements would be possible without the invisible work of so many people. And that is true in professional life as well in our department. And I'm so grateful to Jane Juckno and Jennifer Jones and Megan Lemieux and all of the people who help keep life flowing in this department. I'm really grateful to the Burns Park Players for amazing opportunities to be on stage and for keeping music and playfulness and creativity in my life. I'm grateful to my wonderful friends and neighbors in particular for the advice and sustenance of a monthly Shabbat Jewish group thing. Thank you to the most wonderful group of research colleagues who have amazing minds and amazing analytical powers. Thank you to all of my clinical colleagues in family planning. Vanessa, especially to you for all the partnership in moving all of these programs forward. I'm so grateful. But Jason and Javi and our family planning fellows, Sarah and Lauren, I saw you around somewhere, Laura Castleman, to all of my friends and partners at Planned Parenthood, to Lori Lamoran for running Planned Parenthood here with such vision and creativity and stamina and guts, all the things you bring to that work. It is such an honor to be part of the organization that you have grown and sustained. I have been supported here most generously, intellectually and materially, by many excellent leaders. Tim Johnson and Joel Howell I already mentioned, but I also want to mention Dee Fenner and Mark Proman, who've helped create an environment in which I have absolutely flourished. So many students and trainees are here, and you got to know that it's a reciprocal thing going on, that we learn as much from you and from teaching as you might think you do from us. Finally, to Wally and Janet Jeffries, who have given their name and support to this chair, and to Dr. McMurtry, who co-chaired the campaign around it, and to everybody who contributed to make this chair a reality. I'm incredibly moved by your investment in the vision of having faculty in this department with a commitment to family planning and reproductive health and rights and justice. Last words. This feels incredibly beautiful to me because there has yet to be a day, actually, where I felt like I got it all right. Maybe I had a great research idea, but I forgot to pack I forgot to pack a drink in Lila's lunch. On a typical day, maybe one or two things go really well, but there's always room for improvement. And I'm saying this for the benefit of anybody who ever feels like they don't quite have it right yet, that you can live with that feeling pretty chronically on a day-to-day basis, and still it winds up like giving a talk like this, which is wonderful. Many thanks to everyone who made this possible by their material efforts to create this chair, by their mentorship, intellectual contributions to my work, and by personal contributions to my life. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to give a big introduction. What we chatted about today, Lisa said, what's the order going to be? And I said, I know you're going to be terrific, but nobody wants to follow Willie Parker. So as I said earlier, Dr. Willie Parker, after his fellowship here in family planning, has gone on not only to be a major clinician at Planned Parenthood in Washington, D.C., and Chicago, but all of us know he's been a major advocate and has used his advocacy in Mississippi to really focus international and particularly national highlights on the issues that we're talking about today. Willie, we couldn't be more pleased to have you back home. And the other thing Willie learned from me is always wear a maize and blue tie.
I'm a quick study, Tim. Good morning. Tim alluded to when I left Hawaii, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And when I arrived at Michigan, I figured it out. When I grow up, I want to be you. Now, I've gotten the beard part. I don't think the hair part's going to work, but I'm working on it. So, to say that it's an honor for me to be here on this occasion is an understatement. To be here this morning to offer remarks as my mentor and friend, Dr. Lisa Harris, is installed as the Jeffries Professor in honor of Dr. and Mrs. Jeffries, all three of whom have changed the world for women in both quiet and visible ways. Feels more like an honor for me than the tremendous opportunity to witness this firsthand. It's been said that we often criticize our living nonconformists and we praise our dead heroes. Well, this morning, due to the brilliance and thoughtfulness of the person that we all know and love as TJ, we praise three living nonconformists. These three are being honored, the Jeffries by having this chair endowed in their name, and Lisa by being the first person to hold it. They're being honored for being maladjusted and non-compliant people. They've been maladjusted to societal norms that devalue women and non-compliant with the institutions that deny women their basic human rights and dignities. And I personally want to thank all three of you for doing just that, because you've modeled for us how to live a life that matters. As I travel around the country speaking or simply am present as courageous people battle for reproductive justice at the local level, I often hear them reference the paradigm-shifting work that Lisa has done regarding abortion stigma, conscientious provision of abortion care, and various other topics that she's written on. And frequently, it is all that I can do to restrain myself from mooching on her renown. Although I must confess, there have been a couple of times where I gave in to the temptation. Once I was overhearing someone talking glowingly about your work, Lisa, and I chimed in quite smugly, "Oh, Dr. Lisa Harris? Oh, yes, I know her very well. I trained under her at the University of Michigan along with Dr. Tim Johnson. They are great, and therefore I, by extension, am great." So I seek your pardon for riding on your fame. As I remember my time fondly here as Lisa's first fellow in family planning, I recall many things, but the one thing that sticks out in my mind in particular is the ubiquity of the phrase, the Michigan difference. Now, while I was here, I pondered what that phrase means. Now, while for a lot of U of M football fans, that the hope is that means next year a return to winning football ways, I also have thought about what that meant in the context of my career path since my decision to come here in 2006. And the meaning that it has taken on for me in that regard has been profound. In my current work, here's what the Michigan difference means. As a result of my training here, I'm one of two doctors who travels to the state of Mississippi to secure abortion access for women in that state at the lone clinic that is open there. So in that regard, there is a Michigan difference. So for that, Lisa, Tim, Vanessa Dalton, Laura Castleman, Joel Howell, and the other people in the village, Lisa, that you built to nurture me, you all should feel some sense of accomplishment that the women in Mississippi are better off because of the investment that you made in me. Going to Mississippi, if I don't, who will? This is the title of an essay that I wrote for the National Partnership for Women and Families, as well as this was the question that I asked myself after visiting Jackson Women's Health Organization, the clinic in Mississippi, for the first time in August of 2011. That was about 3 months after that state had defeated a personhood amendment, and about 5 months before the current governor took office to declare that he was intent on making Mississippi an abortion-free state. After becoming an abortion provider full-time on the day that George Tiller was assassinated in 2009, I had become matched with Mississippi through a survey by an activist who sought to match providers who were willing to travel with clinics that didn't have a provider residing in that state. So in response to the question of whether or not I would go to Mississippi, my first response to that was no. And my second response was, hell no. I had seen Mississippi burning one too many times, and driving through the northeast corner of Mississippi to Iowa for medical school, it always felt to me like the nights were darker and the trees were taller. However, I decided that if I was going to say no, that I owed it to myself and to them to visit and see what the needs and the possibilities were. So when I visited and I met the staff, many of whom were older women of color who were veterans of the civil rights movement, who had now shifted their focus to women's reproductive rights, I found right away that it felt right to me to be there, and that was where I wanted to make my contribution to the health and well-being of women. That the overturning of Roe has not been possible in the last 40 plus years is precisely now why we have the reality of domestic terrorism of doctors and patients, clinic sabotage, anti-women vitriol, murder of providers, and even more critically, we now have the incessant effort to gut the provisions of the federal law by the passing of state-level legislation that parses away at the very substance of the Roe decision. What this has meant in practical terms is the creation of mandatory waiting periods, parental notification, clinic trap laws, telemedicine prohibitions, and the Hyde Amendment. These all represent a salami approach to eroding women's fundamental right to health care and reproductive privacy. Mississippi has the dubious distinction of having all of those things in play at once. I'm experiencing the impact of these rules firsthand as the physician plaintiff in the litigation to block the change in abortion regulations in that state that would result in the closing of that clinic, the only clinic in the state. These regulations now require that you be a board-certified OBGYN, which I am, but they also require that you have hospital admitting privileges, which to date I've been unable to secure, despite strong letters of endorsement from Dr. Lisa Harris. Because Dr. Harris made me aware that she said, you know, everybody gets letters of, do you know this person? And she said, I took my time and I wrote a letter endorsing you strongly. And I'm sorry, Lisa, that despite that, I still don't have hospital privileges. So the implication, if we're unsuccessful in prevailing in overturning that law, is that my greatest fear will come to pass, and that is that there will be another place in this country where women will be denied access to the vital health care that we know as abortion. Now, it's been said that when you wrestle with your conscience and you lose, you actually win. For me, I lost that battle of conscience about 11 years ago while I was a faculty member in the OB-GYN department at the University of Hawaii. I mean, I had my dream job in a dream place. I was chilling. Everything was lovely. And yet, despite having all arrived at the dream job in the dream place, there was something unsettled for me in my gut because I was still wrestling with the notion of what it meant to provide abortion care to women. And having grown up in Alabama, that tension came from growing up in a place where if the South is the Bible Belt, then Birmingham is the belt buckle. And in that regard, I was never taught explicitly that abortion was wrong, but it was sort of implied that abortion was wrong because I saw many women as teens and single women who were unable to parent be forced to become parents simply because of a particular religious view. That view came from having a religious and spiritual understanding that was rooted in traditional Protestantism in a very fundamentalist way. And so that left me with the notion that while I was never explicitly against abortion, I was conflicted about what it meant to me to provide the care. And so I was wrestling with that until I encountered a sermon by Dr. Martin Luther King. And I am a big fan of Dr. King and listened to more than just his I Have a Dream speech. And I had listened to that sermon before, but this particular time, at that moment, it resonated with me deeply because Dr. King took the story of the Good Samaritan and in his sermon explained what made the Good Samaritan good. And Dr. King took the story where the Samaritan was a person who happened upon a traveler who had been fallen by robbery. And everyone in the community continued to pass that person by because they were concerned about what might happen to them for stopping to help. And Dr. King said what made the Good Samaritan good was, whereas everyone else passed by that person and said, what will happen to me if I stop to help this person? The Good Samaritan reversed the question of concern and asked, what will happen to this person if I don't stop to help him? And that resonated with me deeply as a women's health provider because on a daily basis, I saw women who had unplanned, unwanted pregnancies or wanted but lethally flawed ones. And I felt impotent to help them until this sermon convinced me that not only was it appropriate for me to have a deep and abiding concern about my patients, but it was absolutely right that I be concerned more about what will happen to my patients if I don't help them than about what will happen to me for providing care that's often deeply stigmatized and judged. So it was at that point that I made the decision to come to the University of Michigan and get the skill to match my compassion. And that's that point that I came and I had the chance to train with my family here. Now, I began traveling to Mississippi to address the fact that that state has one clinic with one provider traveling there, as no doctors there will provide the care, although they've expressed that they were sympathetic to the cause. And I made that decision for a couple of reasons. First, being from the South, Alabama, in fact, and now I reside there again, I know firsthand the realities of poverty, lack of education, and no healthcare access, and hardships that these realities impose. Mississippi, the sister state to my state, is one of the poorest states in the country. 20% of all Mississippians live below the poverty level, which is higher than the national average, but 42% of Black people in Mississippi live below the poverty level, and most of them are women and children. And I felt that it was appropriate for me to go. And while I was convinced that I was doing noble work and was enthused about making the trip, not everyone was happy when I showed up.
The Bible says that God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. You need to repent before it's too late. Go there and count. Tell me how many blacks you got in there versus how many whites. It's genocide. You going to count for me and tell me how many are black and how many are white? Are you going to do that for me? And genocide? Okay. Genocide? You're participating in an extermination of your own race. You are a disgrace.
Thank you.
You are a disgrace. I was reporting to the so-called doctor where it says you'll do no harm. The first thing is to do no harm. The doctor is supposed to protect life, not exterminate. You need to repent before it's too late.
First of all, breathe. That was probably worse for you than it was for me, right? I show that not to show the perils that I face, but I show that to show that that's what women have to pass through to get to the clinic to exercise their human right to reproductive determination. And so the second reason that I made the decision to go to Mississippi is that as a health care provider, I'm aware that reproductive age women of all hues who are sexually active are at risk for unplanned pregnancy. But women of color and women living in poverty, two communities often synonymous but not the same, often have higher rates of abortion need due to being without access to medically accurate sex education, health care, or access to modern contraception. That this is the reality to a fault in Mississippi led me to conclude that these women are amongst the most vulnerable in our country and that they need to be prioritized to secure their access. Third, as a physician understanding all of these problems, as a person of color and as a person who graduated from the ranks of poverty, and more primarily as a protector of human rights, I concluded that with the most vulnerable of women in Mississippi being poor and of color, that if I, a person who comes from those ranks, cannot make them a priority, then who will? Now, don't misunderstand this as a commitment solely on the basis of skin or class identity, because I understand all too well, as Zora Neale Hurston said, all my skin folk ain't my kinfolk. And by that I mean that in addition to those people who are disparaging and shaming black women, many of them are people of color, and they do so in the spirit of the the black genocide campaign that the guy mentioned that I'll speak to in a minute. I'm not promoting so simply skin identity, nor am I promoting the notion that it is the responsibility solely of people of color and people from the ranks of poverty to take care of their community. But rather in a public health sense, what I'm advocating is that I decided to make a targeted effort to aid the women at greatest risk, excluding no one, but making sure that these women are not left out. So in essence, I see my work as no different from the medical relief work that happens internationally when we respond to a health epidemic, much as we're doing right now with Ebola. In my opinion, there's an epidemic of reproductive oppression in Mississippi, or in America for that matter, and it's spreading all over the country despite Roe being in place. So I simply see myself as a reproductive justice first defender with hopes that there's help on the way. As I alluded to earlier, I want to speak to the horrible actions of abortion opponents like the person in the film that leave me offended by its white opponents and disappointed in its black ones. Now, while the legal battle for abortion rights has been playing out in the courts, through crafty legislation to overturn Roe, the parallel war that's going on at the same time has been a cultural war for the hearts and minds of people so that they will accept the injustices that get codified by these laws. The most crafty and cynical tactic currently at play in that cultural war has been the abortionist black genocide campaign. Now, that has gained a lot of traction over the last few years. And the substance of these allegations are the following. So try and follow me if you can. The people who allege that there is a conspiracy state that there is a genocidal plot by the U.S. government being waged against black folk, fronted by Planned Parenthood, to build abortion clinics in black communities and to coerce black women to use contraception and abortion to kill off the black race. They allude that there is a Negro project that was put in place by the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, and that mission, that project is allegedly still core to Planned Parenthood's mission today. And that sounds pretty horrific, right? Meanwhile, back here on planet Earth, there's a different reality because you have to travel in a parallel universe to embrace any of this. But let's say if, for the sake of argument, we entertain this and say that all of their allegations are correct. The question still remains, what does any of that have to do with a woman in 2014, irrespective of her color or background, making the decision to end a pregnancy that she does not desire? It doesn't have anything to do with it. If we embrace the black genocide argument, it is to embrace the notion that women are unable to think for themselves or to make decisions about their lives, and I simply reject that notion outright. The late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said that everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but nobody's entitled to their own facts. And the facts are the following. Black women, followed by Hispanic women, have disproportionately high rates of abortion, making them altogether the greater proportion of women who have abortion. But the largest absolute number of women who have abortions are white women because they're the largest population. And that is to say that abortions come from unplanned, unwanted pregnancies. They don't come from targeted resources in proximity to communities. Only 9% of abortion clinics are situated near predominantly black communities, not the 75% that former African-American presidential candidate Herman Cain repeatedly alleged. And with regard to Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger's involvement with the black community was at the invitation of the black leaders of her day, namely W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, and others who, due to their recognition of the very important message and work around contraception and family planning that she advocated for the community that she targeted, they decided that black women would benefit from this message as well, because black women were not an audience who were targeted for her contraception and family planning message. The reason for illuminating these facts are the following. They demonstrate that the black genocide noise, as I call it, is one, ahistorical and therefore intentionally misleading and racially insulting. Two, not reflective at all of the lives of women, black or white. And three, is patriarchal and a parochial effort at the reproductive control of all women by shaming black women and paralyzing white reproductive rights defenders with allegations of racism, which in my opinion is a brilliant but dastardly strategy. The cleverness of this approach lies in the reality that the women that most of us who provide abortion care for see are disproportionately women of color and poor, and for the reasons that we cited earlier, but the agencies that are in place to help these women are often in non-ethnic and non-minority institutions, and hence the effectiveness of the racism allegation with charge by these people, because they allege that they are now coming clean. This kind of the pseudo-transparency tactic. I'm a white person. I'm an insider. I know what kind of conversations happen in the back door. I know that there's a conspiracy to kill off black people. And so now I've had my come to Jesus moment, and I'm going to tell you all what's really going on. And at the same time, you have black people who are vulnerable to conspiracy theory saying, aha, see, I told you, they're out to get us. And what ends up happening is this very clever trap is twisted to paralyze people in a society that's very uncomfortable talking about race. And so what are we to do about this mischief? Well, here are my thoughts. First of all, we have to deploy all of the resources that we can muster, both material and physical, to the places where women need them the most. Mississippi is one place, but there are many communities in this country that have need for reproductive health services. When I go to Mississippi, I'm seeing women every day who, despite being abjectly poor, somehow they come up with the money to have an abortion, and increasingly they are seeking solutions that will prevent them from needing abortions in the first place. They are seeking long-acting methods of contraception, and what I would like to see happen is expansion of the capacity for women to have access to medically accurate sex education, contraception methods that work, and other resources that they need to live meaningfully. My personal conviction has been to lead by example by making the decision to apply my clinical services where the need is greatest, and that's what resulted in my going to Mississippi. I want to make sure that these women, when they muster the courage to pass by people like that there's somebody there to meet them, so that they will not conclude that everyone is indifferent to their plight and their circumstances. As I sit across from those women when they make it to me, because I'm required by law in Mississippi to counsel with them face to face, when I sit across from them and I look into their eyes and their eyes say to me, whatever you say to me, please don't say no. My heart sinks a little bit, because I'm convinced that is too much power for me to have over another person's life. But I'm elevated by the fact that when I know that for that particular moment and that particular problem, I can restore their hope in their future. I think about the 35-year-old mother of 5 whose 2-year-old had recently died, who was 9 weeks pregnant, when she came to see me, and she told me that she was not able financially or emotionally to care for another child. Or I think about the 15-year-old whose grandmother brought her for an abortion at 10 weeks, who her grandmother had to sell her couch to pay for her abortion. Now, everybody deserves to have a grandmother like that. But this young woman, her grandmother made sacrifices so that, and this young woman wanted to be a doctor, by the way. I think about the two women 2 weeks in a row who were 35 years old, who were breast cancer survivors that had been diagnosed during their pregnancy and who were now pregnant again and needed an abortion so that they could get the chemo. And yet there's a 24-hour waiting period in Mississippi that says that these women have to think about it a little bit more about whether or not they're sure they want to have an abortion. So I'll close with you by saying, for all of these women, Michigan makes a difference because I'm there because I was here. I'll share with you the two thoughts that occupy my mind on a regular basis as I do my work. And I encourage you to think about them. First, someone once said that collectively societies grow great when people plant trees under which they will never sit. And what that says to me is that we have to be committed to doing actions that don't necessarily benefit us directly, but that we conclude will leave the world in a better place. And that we have to be willing to endure the consternation and the judgment of people who don't quite understand why we do the work that we do. And the final and second thought that I practice on a regular basis, and I would encourage you to try it, is that I look into the mirror and I repeat the exhortation of that American sage, Dr. Seuss, as he stated in the Lorax. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. So Dr. Lisa Harris, Nurse Jeffries, Dr. Jeffries, I salute you all and I stand tall on your shoulders. Thank you.